You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Welcome to this episode of the Business of Practice podcast, where we focus on the business and human sides of equine veterinary medicine. In this episode, we're going to talk with Ms. Morgan Webb about retirement plans for small practices. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Grice, business consultant and former equine practice owner. The Business of Practice podcast is brought to you in 2024 by CareCredit. Morgan Webb is the managing partner and a certified financial planner at Estrada Webb and Associates. She is a co-founder of Estrada Webb and Associates and has been providing comprehensive financial planning and implementation to families and business owners for the past 15 years. As a financial advisor, she successfully helps her clients navigate through some of life's most important milestones. Morgan is a certified financial planner, certified fund specialist, an enrolled agent with the IRS. She spent her college years at Texas Christian University and the University of North Texas. Investment advisory and financial planning services are offered through Trinity Portfolio Advisors. Welcome, Morgan. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You know, many of the small equine practices that I counsel and meet on a daily basis don't offer retirement plans for their employees due to expense, complexity. They just may sometimes not understand their options. It all seems way too complicated, but they're so important. And so what do you think are the best ways for these practices to think about saving for retirement?
Well, that's a great question. I definitely see that on my side, and that's not just with the equine veterinarian space, but really all business owners, small business owners across the board. There are several reasons to get a retirement plan in place. One of them being for personal reasons. Practice owners or business owners spend so much of their time and effort pouring all of their resources into their business to make it flourish. And there comes a point to where it's important to start diversifying some of their net worth into other places. And a retirement plan is an easy way to do that. There's also a lot of good tax reasons to have a retirement plan in place. And then obviously there's benefits that you can provide to your employees by having a retirement plan in place. But as you mentioned, it can be super complex and a lot of people don't know where to start. So I just wanted to kind of touch on the timeline of a practice owner and maybe match that up to where certain retirement plans might be appropriate over that timeline. Another thing to mention is, a lot of people don't know who to ask. I mean, if they have a personal financial planner that they deal with on their personal assets, they might not be well versed in what to advise you in the company retirement space. So it's important to have good resources in that area as well. But to speak on that timeline, if you think about your brand new practice owner, let's say they're working out of their truck. They're a one-man shop. Those first years, they're dumping all of their resources into their company. You get to the end of the year, we have a net loss. There's no profit. We're just treading water. That's probably not the best year to establish a retirement plan. But as you get going, you start to see profits in your business. That's the time that you should start looking at maybe putting a retirement plan in place. When you're still a one-man shop, what's called a SEP IRA is probably most important. So that stands for Simplified Employee Pension Plan. It works really well for your one-man shop. You can contribute up to 25% of your compensation, all the way up to $69,000. And that can be all tax deferred. So it's a really good tax vehicle for the one-man shop. As your business continues to grow, hopefully you're starting to hire people to where you're not doing everything. Even if it's just an assistant, you're starting to hire more employees. Once you get employees on the payroll, that SEP IRA starts to not make as much sense as it once did when you were the one-man shop. Because if you're contributing 25% of your compensation into your SEP IRA, then you're also having to contribute that same percentage into each of your employees. And you can see how quick that gets costly. And that might not be the best fit when you start to have employees.
Would that be 25% of their compensation, or whatever you put into your SEP, you have to put into theirs?
So let's assume that the business owner is taking a salary, right? They're taking a W-2 income. It would be 25% of that W-2 income. If they're a sole proprietor, let's say they file a Schedule C, and so they're not taking necessarily a salary, but they have a net profit after all their expenses, and that's what they receive, then there's a complicated figure, but it equals out to 20% of the net profit that would be considered their compensation that they could put into their SEP IRA. But if you have an assistant that is working for you, even part-time, you're having to put 25, if we're using that same number, 25%, if you're putting 25% into your account, you're going to have to put 25% of that assistant's compensation into their SEP IRA.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I actually know a practice who is doing that, and they have kept doing that as they got employees, and they don't have very many employees that leave, I'll tell you.
Right. It's a great incentive. I see it every once in a while, and it makes sense for some, but they are weighing out the pros and cons of putting that much into their employees' accounts every year. The SEP IRA, those are also only company contributions. So the employee is not taking any money from their side to put into the account. That's only going one direction. So that's another thing to consider when looking at a SEP IRA. When you're the business owner and the company is only making the contributions, it's kind of one and the same because you're the business owner and you're the employee. When you start to get employees that maybe want to contribute over and beyond, the SEP IRA doesn't allow for that.
Gotcha.
Okay. So then you get to a point to where maybe you're hiring more people and the SEP IRA doesn't make sense, but you're making profit every year. Business is good. You're able to hire 2, 3, 4, 10 people. That's when I see a lot of people put into place what's called a simple IRA. So a simple IRA stands for Saving Incentive Match Plan for Employers. Okay. This feels a lot like a 401k, except it's not governed by ERISA. And there's a lot of rules and guidelines that go with ERISA. So simple is in the name, and there's a lot of aspects to the simple IRA that does make it simple. And one of the things is because it doesn't have to follow the guidelines of ERISA. But with this plan, there is a company match, but it's up to 3% of that employee's compensation. So in the original example with the SEP IRA, you're not putting 25% of their compensation, you're putting a maximum of 3%. And then the employee can choose to put money into that plan as well. So they can contribute a maximum of $16,000 a year that comes from their paycheck and is put into the plan. This works really well for a lot of those businesses that have a handful of employees. It works well. The costs are in line. You're not having to file tax forms every year. You don't have the administrative complexities that go with some of the further plans. Okay. So then your business keeps growing and your employee count keeps growing and maybe your needs keep growing. So then we look at the 401k plan. So the 401k plan is kind of a natural progression from the simple IRA, but it is governed by ERISA. There are certain guidelines and testing that you have to pass each year to making sure that you're not discriminating the lay staff compared to the highly compensated or the owners. There are certain things that you have to do for everyone in the plan. The contribution limits for this year, you can contribute up to $23,000 if you're an employee from your paycheck. As far as the company match, there's a lot of flexibility with how much you can choose to match or not match. Again, with some of those testing provisions, there's safe harbor company matches that automatically get you to pass all those tests, depending on what the owner's specific goals are. Because if those tests aren't passed, then the owners or the highly compensated could get to the end of the year and get a refund of what they've put into their plan. So you want to make sure that the plan design is meeting the goals of the ownership group. There are loan provisions on 401ks, so that would be something not available to simple IRAs. And then what else? So that's the 401k. Jumping up to more options, we have profit sharing. And in my experience and my practice, typically the 401k and the profit sharing go hand in hand. They're one and the same plan, but the profit sharing allows you to get even more money into that plan. Again, the profit sharing is from company-only profits. It's a company-only contribution, but there's typically a vesting schedule tied to it. So it's a really good tool to use when you're looking at retaining employees. Because if your vesting schedule is over the course of 6 years, then your employees have incentive to maybe stick around for a minute to make sure that they can take advantage of all the assets that are in their retirement plan. And then over and above that, there's the defined benefit plan or the cash balance plan. That works when cash flow is super strong and consistent. And this is a good potential option for a business owner that is trying to defer taxes up into, upwards of a couple $100,000 each year. So that's also a benefit. But that's kind of the spectrum of retirement plans. With the equine retirement space, I see most people fall into either the simple IRAs because they do have a few employees, all the way to 401ks makes sense with the attached profit sharing component.
So where does the Roth stuff fit in? Is that ever in business plans or is that for personal plans only?
Absolutely. So the Roth feature, let me just explain the difference between making a traditional contribution or a pre-tax contribution versus a Roth. The Roth is one of those acronyms that's in the financial space that I hear all the time, but when I'm breaking it down, that can be foreign language to someone who's not in the financial industry. So simple IRAs typically what they're used to is putting pre-tax dollars into their simple IRA. You can also do pre-tax dollars into the 401k. It's and that can be interchanged with a traditional contribution. Your money goes into the account without ever being taxed. So when you get your W-2 at the end of the year, that box 1 is not going to include the pre-tax dollars that you put into your 401k because it wasn't taxed that year. But it's going to sit into that 401k account and be invested, or the simple IRA. It's going to grow tax deferred over all of your working years. And then in retirement, because you've paid tax on none of that money all of those years, the first dollar that you pull from that account, you're going to pay ordinary income tax rates. Okay. One of the misnomers, especially for people utilizing their company retirement plans, over their working years, is that they would be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. In this situation, if you put all of your savings in pre-tax dollars and now you're in retirement and 100% of your savings is in a traditional 401k or the simple IRA, then every dollar that you pull out is going to be taxed at ordinary income tax rates. And you're effectively going to be in the same tax bracket you were in your working years if your expenses stay the same, if that is your bucket of money. So that's the pre-tax side. The Roth side is you're putting in after-tax dollars into your retirement plan. Okay, so when you get your W-2 at the end of the year, it shows that you've made a contribution into your 401k, but you will also be taxed on that contribution into that account. And then it will be invested in the market. It will grow tax deferred over all of your working years. But in retirement, when you take that distribution, you have already paid tax on that original contribution. So you're going to take the money out tax-free. This is a huge incentive for a lot of people. One, your younger employees that have a lot of years to retirement, that makes a lot of sense because you have all of those years to get that growth in your account that you will never have to pay tax on. Number two, there are Roth IRAs that you could contribute to outside of company retirement plans, but there are income limitations on how much money you can make and still be able to contribute to a Roth IRA. There are no income limitations to a Roth 401k. So your high income earners that have looked at their entire financial picture and they see, hey, I have a lot of tax deferred money, or I have a lot of taxable money coming down the pipe, but my tax-free bucket is empty. This is a good way to start to build that tax-free bucket, even if you are a high income earner, because of the flexibility it gives you in your retirement years.
The Business of Practice podcast is brought to you by CareCredit. CareCredit keeps equine veterinarians at the heart of care by providing horse owners with simple, budget-friendly financing options. By helping to bridge the gap between costs and care, CareCredit supports healthy financial relationships between veterinarians and their clients. Clients have a flexible way to pay over time for all types of care, and practices get paid in 2 business days. It's a payment experience everyone can feel good about.
So all of those Roth plans would be outside of employer-sponsored plans. Is that correct?
No. So the Roth provision is available for 401ks. There's also been legislation changes for making Roth contributions in simple IRAs and SEP IRAs. Now, I say that with a caveat because in a 401k, you have a record keeper to keep track of all the administration of this portion is Roth, the company match is pre-tax. Maybe you did a combination of the two, but all of the back end accounting is being kept track of. With a simple IRA, you don't have a record keeper attached to that. So currently, that is a new law. And what I see is that the custodians that offer simple IRAs haven't figured out to keep track of that. So I don't see it utilized in practice. They're still working out the how. But I do expect that should be available down the line. And it very well might be available for your existing simple IRA, and I'm just not aware of it. But I do know that for 401ks, the Roth portion is definitely a big incentive to take advantage of, regardless of where you are in income space or in years to retirement.
So when should people consider doing a conversion? Because then they'd have to pay tax on everything they're converting, right?
The Roth conversion.
Yeah. How can they figure that out?
That's a case-by-case basis, in my opinion.
Okay.
I think that it's important to work really closely with your CPA and financial advisor to do the calculations of what those tax implications are. I will say that if you're choosing to convert a traditional 401k to a traditional Roth, or a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, something that I do think is important is when you do determine whatever that tax number is, that you're paying that tax with dollars that you have outside of the plan. So that's also something to consider when looking at Roth conversions. You'll see a lot of headlines in the news about, hey, have you talked to your advisor about doing a Roth conversion during times when the stock market is down? And the reason is because you're getting all those shares converted at that lower price. Currently we're in these all-time highs and we keep hitting new peaks, and you'll notice we don't see a lot of those headlines right now because it doesn't make sense from that standpoint. But your personal standpoint, you might have some net loss that is specific to your situation, to where it does make sense to do that in this particular year, even though the stock market is performing the way it is. So that's why I say it really depends on the individual, and it's really a team approach of having those close conversations with your advisor and your CPA.
That's great advice. So with practices setting up, say, a simple plan or setting up a 401k plan for their employees, what do you think the average cost is? I know it's hard to, but ballpark, because people sometimes just have no idea, how many zeros we're talking.
Right. Unfortunately, it is just how the industry is. There's fees that are being charged a myriad of ways, right? So with a SEP IRA or even simple IRAs, you're effectively just creating individual accounts. So you might have a fee for your financial advisor to give you advice and manage those accounts. There might be small account fees. There's investment fees in the underlying funds that you hold within those accounts, but they're fairly simple to administrate, and the cost to the employer is fairly nominal. You're talking maybe a couple $1,000s. With 401ks, profit sharing, cash balance plans, now you get into the ERISA governed plans that do have additional administrative fees and complexities. you have to have a record keeper. And so there's a fee associated with that. So again, the Roth contributions, the pre-tax contributions, the company matches, all of that that's being kept organized and accounted for on the back end, there's someone handling that. The TPA, that's the third party administrator. They are the compliance. They're making sure the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. They're making sure that the plan design conforms with the ERISA guidelines. They're making sure that the Form 5500 is appropriately prepared and filed. They handle a lot of the rules around loans and distributions. So there's fees for that. And then there's other administrative fees that go with a 401k that is more complex. And those same players are in a profit sharing plan and a cash balance plan. Plus you have, you still have investment fees, you have a financial advisor fee, you have the per participant fees that are similar to the simple IRAs. So now we're looking at, going from $1,000 or $2,000 to maybe $3,000 to $5,000. And in a lot of cases on the far end, you might be paying $10,000 for a plan. So with that, I will say that when looking at cost, it is important to balance out how much you're saving in taxes, depending on how much you and your team is going to utilize the plan. And then number two, there are certain tax credits that have come down the pike with this legislation that's been passed, the Secure Act and the Secure 2.0 Act, that has really worked to bring the barrier of entry down for the 401k plan. So even prior to, 4 years ago, it was very difficult for a lot of small business owners to make a 401k make sense, especially when they're starting out. As the plan grows, it becomes more competitive. But when you're starting a 401k plan out, it's you don't have those economies of scale like the big companies do. You also can't afford all the bells and whistles that the big companies do. So there are tax credits that help kind of offset that. One is if you don't have a plan in place, there's a startup tax credit, and this is for eligible employers, that is up to $5,000 for 3 years to offset the cost associated with the 401k plan. And honestly, for the simple IRA plan as well. So for any retirement plan, if you're going to start up a plan and you're an eligible employer, you can take advantage of this tax credit. Okay. Another feature that is available is a tax credit for automatic enrollment. So again, when we talk about plan design and just the nature and behavior around your typical American, if you have to take action to opt into the plan, most likely and statistically, you're going to get busy and forget about it. But if you are automatically enrolled in the plan, even if you don't want to save, statistically, you're not going to opt out of the plan. And so you are setting yourself up for a more successful retirement just based on how the plan is designed. So because of that, legislation put a tax credit that incentivizes adding automatic enrollment into your plan, which is $500 for 3 years. People can still opt out, but it's a nature of designing the plan to make everyone successful, even if they don't know anything about the retirement space.
That's so interesting about human nature, isn't it?
For sure.
You'll say, wow, I should probably sign up for that retirement plan. And then somebody says, oh, you want to go have a beer?
Right.
And
Right. Well,
it's
and
all over.
that goes all the way back to, the first question is you have the practice owner that says, hey, I think this would be a good idea. And then it gets too complex and then they push it off.
That's exactly right. They say, my head is too full. I can't deal with one more thing. I remember back when we at my practice first had a 401k plan, and it was before there were all the rules about being responsible for the, making sure you give the people help deciding how to invest their money, and that you were then it was like all of a sudden you were responsible if bad things happened. And I was the person who had signed of my partners, and I was like, oh, I want out.
Right.
We need a third party administrator now.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's all about building a team of people who know what they're doing. Some of the
Right.
things that are required with ERISA governed plans put, honestly, people who deal with horses all day in a position to do things that they're just not educated in,
Right.
and nor have the time to get up to speed on that. So it's about building a team around you to handle those things so you can get back to your day job and still have a sound and robust retirement plan in place for both you and your employees.
I agree wholeheartedly. What else should our listeners know about retirement plans today?
So I'll speak on two sides of this. One would be specifically to the practice owner. Okay. So again, as I mentioned at the beginning, at the beginning of you starting your practice and all the way through, really, you're conditioned to pour all of your money and resources into your business. And hopefully you're going to get the best return on that business that you possibly can, because that's where you spend most of your time and effort. So that it should be your highest expected return. But as your net worth grows, it is important to start to begin to diversify your net worth away from your practice. And having a company retirement plan is just a really simple way to start that process. I will say a retirement plan is just a piece of the picture. The fact is, a practice owner has many financial problems to solve, both for the short term and the long term. So knowing how all those pieces fit together is really the difference between someone that has peace of mind around their financial security versus someone that's white knuckling and puts their head in the sand. The most successful sports teams in the world have great coaches. So I think that practice owners should look at themselves and their success no different in that regard. And again, you don't need to know everything. You just need to align yourself with the resources and the people that can help guide you in those areas. On the employee side, I find, and again, we're talking about human behavior. So I find that I talk to a lot of people that, both in the equine space and really across all industries, where financial literacy and investments and making those types of decisions, that's not their day job. That's not something they're well versed in. It's unknown. And so then it's scary. And because they don't have all the answers, they decide to make no decision. I think that the most important thing that an employee or an employer, for that matter, can do is decide to save and start today. An employer can have the most robust company plan, but if you aren't taking advantage of it, you're not helping yourself. You don't have to know all the things before you start participating in your future, before you start participating, you just have to participate. And just start where you are. So if you're not in a position to save, say, 5% of your paycheck, well, then maybe save 3%. And next year, bump it up a little. Just start where you are. If you don't know anything about investing and the market scares you, I will say stick to the default target date funds that are within your company retirement plan. So it can handle all the investment acumen that you're not up to speed on. And the best way to build financial literacy is to start with small, consistent actions. Most people think financial literacy is about complex investments, but really it's about understanding basic money principles, tracking your spending, and setting clear financial goals. If your company doesn't offer a retirement plan, that's not an out or an excuse to not work towards your retirement goals. So it's not your employer's job to set you up for a sound retirement. It is your job to take action to set yourself up for a sound retirement. And oh, by the way, if you work for a company that does offer a plan, you should take advantage of that. But be accountable and engage and participate. There are individual retirement plans. You can open up an outside brokerage account or just a basic savings account that you can start to develop that discipline to save. So I know we talk about retirement plans and company-sponsored plans, but I really encourage any employee or any person out there to just really take ownership of their financial future and not wait on somebody else to solve that for them.
And what I would add to that is, and if you have student loans, even if, you've just come out of veterinary school and you've got, big student loans, start saving for retirement, because the dollars you put away when you're 26, 27, 28, they have so much time to grow. If you wait till you're 45, you're screwed. You got to do it. You got to start doing it.
It adds up. I would definitely, I have the luxury being in my business of seeing the perspective and the results of good decisions and bad on a daily basis. And I've been doing this for 15 plus years. I've been doing this since I got out of college. So I was in this space talking to people who made really good decisions early on and those that had to scramble and catch up later on. And I'll just say that people don't understand the leverage that time can offer them. When you look at, there's surveys out there that survey all the millionaires out there. 8 out of 10 of those people invest in their company retirement plan. Long-term investing is how the majority of those millionaires have come to be. It's not about, having this big windfall or selling this big company. And of course, those people exist, but there are plenty of just normal Americans that have really focused on saving over a long period of time that are set up with a really sweet financial picture come retirement because of the actions that they made while they were young and the discipline that they had to continue to save over the course of their working years.
Well said, Morgan. Well said. That's all such good advice. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's this is such important information for people's future, I hope that everybody who doesn't have a retirement account will run out and get one going now after hearing this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if the takeaway is nothing more than figuring out how much you can save and then start it today, then I feel like we've left it better than we found it.
That's right. I agree. Thank you all for listening to the Business of Practice podcast. And a big thanks to our sponsor, CareCredit. And to all my listeners out there, be brave, embrace change, and savings.